Boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Robert Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert. Alright, NCAA Week 5. So far, so good this year. Week 4, win-loss, 44-15. Against the spread, 29-30. Over-under, 31-28. Brings me year-to-date totals of 165-38 win-loss. Against the spread, 94-99. Over-under, 104-89. Overall, I'm at 61.6%. I can accept that. My goal is 65, but hey, 61. We're getting better each week, so that's all that matters. So we have all 55 games once again here for Week 5. Week 6, I may cut that number down and kind of get rid of some of the riffraff games and kind of more deal with the teams that are looking for a conference championship, looking for a playoff berth. Kind of narrow it down a little bit and do a little bit more about those teams. But here in Week 5, we have first game, we have Navy Midshipmen who are 2-0 versus the 3-0 Memphis Tigers. Tigers are favored by 10.5 at home. Navy is 3-1 versus Memphis all time. I'm actually taking Memphis to win this. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. I'm taking Navy to win this. I'm going to change what I got written down here. I'm taking Navy to win. I'm giving them the 10.5. I got them covering it. I'm taking under on the 56. A change on the fly. Next up, we have the 2-1 Duke Blue Devils versus the 2-1 Virginia Tech Hokies. Virginia Tech is 8-2 all time versus Duke. The Hokies are favored by 2.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 54.5. Next up, we have the 3-0 Penn State Nittany Lions versus the 2-1 Maryland Terrapins. Big Ten matchup here. Big Ten East matchup. Penn State is favored by 7 on the road. They are actually 4-1 all-time versus Maryland. So I got the Nittany Lions winning, going to 4-0, and then covering the 7 points and under on the 57. Next up, we have a battle of 2-1 teams out of the Mountain West. San Jose Spartans versus the Air Force Falcons. Falcons are 3-0 all-time versus the Spartans. I got the Falcons winning. I got the Spartans covering the 19. It's a pretty big number. And I am taking under on the 55. Next up, we have the Pac-12 matchup for the 3-1 Arizona Sun Devils versus the 4-0 California Golden Bears. Golden Bears favored by 3.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 39. The Bears are all-time 7-3 versus the Sun Devils. Next up, we have the Big Ten matchup out of the West. We have the 1-2 Northwestern Wildcats versus the 3-0 Wisconsin Badgers. Badgers are favored by 24 at home. Because of their defense giving up on an average of 4 points a game, and their offense scoring damn near 50, 48.3 to be exact, I have the Badgers covering the 24, taking over on the 45. If they just do what they've done all year, 48-4, that's already over on the 45. So next up, we have the 1-2 Northern Illinois Huskies versus the 0-3 Vanderbilt Commodores. Commodores favored by 6.5 at home. I do have them winning, covering, and over on the 54.5. Next up, we have the Texas A&M Aggies here 2-2 versus the 2-2 Arizona Razorbacks. Arkansas Razorbacks, excuse me. Both out of the Southeast, out of the SEC West. The Aggies are favored by 23.5 at home. Or sorry, on the road, excuse me. So the Aggies are favored by 23.5 against the Razorbacks. It's a pretty big number. So I got the Razorbacks covering. I got over on the 56.5, but I got the Aggies winning. Next up, we have the Holy Cross Crusaders 1-2 versus the 2-2 Syracuse Orange. Syracuse favored by 37.5 at home. I do have the Orange winning. I have Holy Cross covering at 37.5, and I'm taking over on the 54.5. Next up, we have the Kansas Jayhawks 2-2 versus the TCU Horned Frogs 2-1. Horned Frogs favored by 16 at home. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 48. Next up, we have the Texas Tech Red Raiders 2-1 versus the Oklahoma Sooners 3-0. This is going to be a big test for the Sooners. I know Texas Tech is 2-1, but it is a Big 12 matchup. Excuse me, God, I'm really fucking things up today. It's a Big 12 matchup. Anything happening in the Big 12, we know that. Oklahoma is favored by 27. I have them winning. I have Texas Tech covering at 27 because it is the Big 12 and they like to put points on the board and picking over on the 73.5. Next up, we have the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders at 1-2 versus the 3-0 Hawkeyes. Hawkeyes are favored by 23.5 at home. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 50. Next up, we have the BYU Cougars 2-2 versus the 2-1 Toledo Rockets. BYU is favored by 1. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 59. Next up, we have the 2-2 Buffalo Bulls versus the 1-3 Miami of Ohio Redhawks. Redhawks are favored by 1.5. I'm giving it to Buffalo. I got Buffalo winning, covering the 1.5 and under on the 49.5. Next up, we have the Battle of Michigan. We have Central Michigan Chippewas versus the Western Michigan Broncos. Both teams are 2-2. The Broncos are favored by 17.5. I have them winning, covering, and over on the 59.5. Next up, out of the Big Ten, we have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 1-2 versus the 2-1 Michigan Wolverines. Wolverines are favored by 27.5, winning, covering the 27.5 and over on the 48. Next up, we have the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens 3-1 versus the 2-2 Pittsburgh Panthers. Panthers favored by 28 at home, winning, covering, over on the 52.5. The Coastal Carolina Chanticleers 3-1 versus the 3-0 Appalachian State Mountaineers. Mountaineers favored by 15.5, win, cover, under on the 59.5. Wake Forest Demon Deacons out of the ACC 4-0. Could they have a run in them? Could they be battling for the ACC title this year? Versus the Boston College Eagles, who are 3-1. Demon Deacons favored by 3.5, winning, covering, under on the 66. Next up, a battle of 2-2 teams. We have the Florida Atlantic Owls 2-2 versus the Charlotte 49ers 2-2. The Owls are favored by 1, win, cover, under on the 65.5. Next up, we have out of the Big Ten, we have the Indiana Hoosiers 3-1 versus the Michigan State Spartans 3-1. Spartans favored by 2 touchdowns at home. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 44.5. Next up, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers 3-0 versus the Purdue Boilermakers 1-2. Purdue is favored by 1 at home. I'm giving the 1 to Minnesota. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 56.5. Next up, out of the Big 12, we have the Iowa State Cyclones, who are 2-1 versus the Baylor Bears, who are 3-0. The Cyclones are favored by 2.5 on the road. I'm giving the 2.5 to Baylor at home. I got the Bears winning, covering, and over on the 56.5. Next up, we have an SEC matchup. The Ole Miss Rebels 2-2 versus the Alabama Crimson Tide, who are 4-0. Alabama is favored over Ole Miss by 35.5. I got the Crimson Tide winning. I got Ole Miss covering the 35.5, and I'm taking over on the 61. We have the 4-0 Virginia Cavaliers versus the 2-1 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Irish, in order for them to make the playoffs, I think they have to win out. I don't think a 2-loss Notre Dame team can get into the playoffs. Being their independent schedule, they don't belong to a conference. There's no conference championship. They have to go pretty much undefeated the rest of the way and hope for help. Notre Dame is favored by 11. I like what Virginia's playing. They are 4-0. They're on the thick of things for the ACC. I have Notre Dame winning. I have Virginia covering the 11 and under on the 50.5. Which will help Virginia too. Even if they lose, their loss is going to be to a Notre Dame team that ends the season with 1 loss. That actually helps Virginia, I believe. So, next up we have the Temple Owls 2-1 hosting the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, are 1-2. The Owls are favored by 9.5. I have them winning, covering, and over on the 51. Next up, we have the battle of the of winless teams. Battle of the 0-4 teams, the Akron Zips and the Massachusetts Minutemen. Somebody has to win this, don't they? Can end in a tie? Can both teams not have a win? Both teams can't lose, we know that. Akron is favored by 6 on the road. Oh, excuse me. Given the 6 to UMass, I got them winning, covering the 6 and under on the 64. This game will not be pretty. Next up, we have the 4-0 Clemson Tigers going into North Carolina versus the Tar Heels, who are 2-2. Tigers are favored by 26.5. I got them winning. I got the Tar Heels covering that 26.5, taking over on the 61. Next up, we have the USC Trojans 3-1 versus the Washington Huskies 3-1. A Pac-12 matchup. The Huskies are favored by 10 at home. Win, cover, over on the 58.5. Next up, we have the 4-0 SMU Mustangs versus the 1-2 South Florida Bulls. The Mustangs are favored by 7.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 16.5. The Townsend Tigers 3-1 versus the Florida Gators. Let's go Townsend. Townsend is a 35.5 point dog at Florida at the Swamp. So I got the Gators winning, covering that 35.5 and over on the 61.5. Next up, we have Cincinnati Bearcats 2-1 versus the Marshall Thunder and Herd 2-1. Bearcats favored by 3, win, cover, over on the 45. Next up, we have the 3-1 Louisiana Raging Cajuns versus the Georgia Southern Eagles, who are 1-2. Raging Cajuns favored by 3.5. I got them winning, covering, over on the 59. Next up, we have the Arkansas State Red Wolves 2-2 versus the Troy Trojans, who are 2-1. Trojans are favored by a touchdown. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 61. We have the East Carolina Pirates 2-2 versus the 1-2 Old Dominion Monarchs. The Monarchs are favored by 1.5 at home. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 48. Next up, we have the New Mexico Lobos, who are 2-1 versus the Liberty Flames, who are 2-2. The Flames are favored by 7.5 at home. I'm giving the 7.5 to New Mexico. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 71.5. Next up, we have the South Alabama Jags 1-3 versus the Louisiana Monroe Warhawks 1-2. The Warhawks are favored by 16. I got the Jags covering the 16 and over on the 58. Next up, we have the Yukon Huskies, who are 1-2 versus the UCF Knights, who are 3-1. Knights are favored by 43. I got the Huskies covering the 43, taking over on the 65. Next up, the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs, who are 3-1 versus the Rice Owls, who are 0-4. Bulldogs favored by 10.5 at home with an over-under of 49. I have the Bulldogs winning, covering the 10.5 and over on the 49. Next up, we have the Stanford Cardinals, who are 1-3 versus the 1-2 Oregon State Beavers. Stanford favored by 3 on the road. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 58.5. Out of the Big 12, we have the Kansas State Wildcats 3-0 versus the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who are 3-1. The Cowboys are favored by 4.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 62. The UTEP Miners 1-2 versus the 2-2 Southern Mississippi Golden Eagles. Golden Eagles are favored by 25. I got UTEP covering it, the Eagles winning it, and under on the 52.5. Nicholls State Colonials 2-1 versus the 1-3 Texas State Bobcats. Bobcats are favored by a touchdown. Field goal. Favored by 3. Just 3 points against Nicholls State. I had the Bobcats winning, covering, and under on the 71. Next up, I have the UAB Blazers, who are 3-0 versus the 1-2 Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. The old Hilltoppers. They are a 3-point dog at home. I got the Blazers winning, covering, and over on the 45.5. Out of the SEC, we have the Michigan State Bulldogs 3-1 versus the 4-0 Auburn Tigers. Tiger can beat a Bulldog, right? Yeah, pretty sure. Auburn's favored by 11. I got the Tigers winning, covering, and over on the 47.5. NC State Wolfpack 3-1 versus the 2-2 Florida State Seminoles. Seminoles are favored by 4.5 at home. I'm giving the 4.5 to NC State. I got NC State winning, covering, and under on the 60. We have the 2-2 Kentucky Wildcats versus the 1-3 South Carolina Gamecocks. Gamecocks favored by Dose at home. I got them winning, covering at 52, or an over on the 52. Next up, a Big Ten matchup of the Ohio State Buckeyes 4-0 versus the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Got them old Cornhuskers in Nebraska, 3-1. Hopefully, anyone who's affected by the floods in Nebraska are safe. Hopefully, no one's injured. Hopefully, everything's taken care of. I know the flooding is coming back there in Nebraska, Iowa, and northwest Missouri. Thoughts out to everyone involved. Back to the game. We have the Ohio State Buckeyes favored by 17.5. Got the Cornhuskers covering. And under on the 66.5. Colorado State Rams 2-1-3 versus the 2-1 Utah State Aggies. Aggies are favored by 23.5 at home. Got them winning, covering. I'm taking under on the 72. Next, we have the Houston Cougars 1-3 versus the 2-2 North Texas Mean Green. North Texas is favored by 6, winning, covering, over on the 59.5. The UNLV Rebels 1-2 versus the Wyoming Cowboys 3-1. Cowboys are favored by 10. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 50.5. Fresno State Bulldogs 1-2 versus the 0-4 New Mexico State Aggies. Fresno is favored by 17.5 against the Aggies. I'm giving the 17.5 to the Aggies. I'm picking the Aggies to win. Bulldogs to cover the 17.5 and under on the 62. Next, we have the Washington State Cougars 3-1 versus the Utah Utes at 3-1. The Youth are favored by 5. Got them winning, covering, and over on the 56.5. Next up, we have the Hawaiian and Rainbow Warriors 3-1 versus Nevada Wolfpack, who are also 3-1. Nevada is favored by 2 at home. I got them winning, covering, under on the 64. And last but not least, the UCLA Bruins 1-3 versus the 2-1 Arizona Wildcats. Wildcats favored by 7.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 71. So that is going to wrap up week number 5 of the NCAA college football season. One change I have to make to my notebook here is that first game. I picked Navy over Memphis, and I wrote down Memphis. So to recap that game 1, 2-0 Navy Midshipmen versus 3-0 Memphis. I am giving the 10.5 to Navy. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 56. So that's going to wrap up week number 5. As always, thanks for watching the Robert Sports Show. Make sure you check out week 6. Like I said, going to do a few less games in week 6, but I'm going to get more into the Heisman race, kind of stats, and kind of been more who's looking at winning a conference title, and the kind of the undefeated teams and the one-loss teams, and who's in place in each conference. So it's going to be some of the 2-2 teams won't be there, but we'll definitely get a wide variety of what's going on in the NCAA football season. But as always, thanks for watching the Robert Sports Show. Don't just have a great day. Have a spiffy day. Robert Sports Show, your YouTube leader in sports channel content.